Hello everyone. Welcome to another weekly Q&A. Today I'm going to discuss exercise selection and more specifically what you should consider when you're looking at which exercise to select for you. Okay, so it can be a minefield of choice and options when it comes to which exercise is going to be the most appropriate for you to choose. And there are going to be so many factors that have an impact on that. So it's really important to look at what those factors may be. Have you got mobility restrictions, for example? Have you got things that are going to be implications with regards to injuries as well? All these things are really important to take into consideration and will have an impact on what is going to be the best exercise option or selection for you. So when it comes to exercise themselves, if we're looking at resistance training, of course, you've got your key kind of compound movements. So looking at multi-joint movements. So those are the big movements really that are going to hit more than one muscle group at the same time. With those in mind, if we're looking at the lower body, for example, if we're looking at more of a knee dominant compound movement for the lower body, so most obvious one would be a squat pattern. Squat is a fantastic movement. Okay. First of all, if you're selecting a squat, what is your current skill level with the squat pattern itself? Have you ever performed a squat full stop? If you haven't, best place to start is nailing a bodyweight squat and ensure that everything is functioning and performing as it should do for you on that regard before you then look to add a load. The common mistake that tends to happen, I'm putting my hands up and say I did the same thing, is it can be quite easy to jump straight into a barbell squat then, okay? And I'd say that this is going to set you up for a bit more of a challenge. An empty bar straight away by itself is 20 kilos. If you've never loaded a squat pattern before, going straight to 20 kilos is going to be a fair jump. So have a look at using a goblet variation to begin with. So loading with a dumbbell or a kettlebell in this front rack position here. Build your strength up with that, get used to having a load on the body as well as you go through and how that's going to change the dynamic and the feel of the squat, and then look to graduate and progress on to a barbell variation from there, okay? But say, for example, a squat wasn't for you. Not everyone is set up biomechanically. What I mean by biomechanically is bone length and skeletal system setup. They aren't simply set up to perform squats. So if you fall under that category, you could think, oh, well, what am I supposed to do? Well, you can perform a leg press, for example. And look at these different things that you could do. Or you could do something that mimics a squat pattern within a machine. So like a machine squat, a V squat, something like that, that would allow you to enter the position, but would work around any restrictions you may have within that movement pattern, okay? So it is really, really, really important to remember that it isn't one size fits all when it comes to exercises. And I think this is something that can be quite easily overlooked as well, is that, oh, well, what's his name's brothers, sisters, uncles, bin man, says that he follows a bro split and he's in the best shape he's ever been. Cool, good for him. But that doesn't mean it's going to work for you. You know, far from it. Everything about them is going to be different to you. Their restrictions with time, for example, how many days a week they can train, their physical activity levels on a day-to-day basis away from the gym. Everything's going to be different. Okay, so just because it works for someone doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to work for you, and that's really important to consider. So when it comes to exercise selection as well, there is so many variations and so many different versions of the same movement pattern, which is cool in its sense because it means that you've always got variety out there and you're always going to be able to do something slightly different. The big factor as to whether a exercise variation is going to work well for you or not is it going to be biomechanically beneficial for you, you know? So if we had a look at a squat again, just give you a basic understanding of some biomechanics. I should have got a pen and paper really, actually. Hold that thought. Right, so a good example to have a look at biomechanics and the impact this has. Look at my pen just for a second. It's a lightsaber. Anyway, stop being a child, Aaron. Get back to the topic in hand. Biomechanics. So staying with the squat movement. let's draw side on, stick man, two different kind of biomechanics setups. So, okay, so I'm going to give him a little head, give him some feet here, because that's only nice. Cool. I don't know why I've drawn this so small, but I've drawn it pretty small, but you'll get the idea. So we've got this chap here who's with his lower limbs and his torso are relatively in proportion, okay? So you've got the femur, which is the bone of the upper leg, and then you've got your tib and your fib, which is the bone of the lower leg, okay? So this chap here, we'll call him Keith. Keith's gonna have a pretty easy time at squatting because he's in good proportion between his tib and his fib and his femur. Whereas this poor chap here, we'll call him Donald. He, as you can see, has got a pretty short femur. I don't think anyone really looks like this. He's got a pretty short femur in comparison to his tib and his fib, okay? So as a result, he's going to have a lot more hard time keeping an upright torso angle as he goes into his squat. Because as Donald, poor Donald here, say for example, if he has let's draw another little picture here. If he has a weight on his back and he's looking to drop down into a squat, and he's got these tiny little femurs, what's going to have to happen is, actually I'm going to try that again, is his torso is going to have to go really quite far angled forwards for him to be able to get into something. If I draw like a circle here, and that can be the bar going across. So Donald here, ignore this thing, I messed it up. You can see he's trying to drop into his squat. He's going to have to, say for example, if I kind of mimicked this guy, if I mimicked Donald, and my femurs were quite short, so imagine I had a fair bit less going on here, right? And I went to drop down, I'm going to get to a point where I run out of room here, and I just have to kind of tip forward with my torso, and it's going to be a lot more hip dominant. I'm just going to run out of space, right? I'm quite lucky, I'm short. I've got jeans on in a minute, so I'm not sure how well this is going to go, but my proportions are relatively equal. You can see from my femur and my tib and fib, they're relatively equal. So I've had a fair bit of practice with my squat, arguably, and I can drop into a position where everything kind of locks into place quite nicely, and I can keep a nice upright torso, okay? So I'm more like, what was his name? Keith, okay? So you can see straight away how biomechanics is going to have a huge role to play when it comes to exercise selection. So it's just being smart with that, and identifying that. It's going to have a huge role to play with how well you perform, you know? So poor Donald is going to really struggle performing a back squat effectively without having to have a huge angle with his torso, okay? Straight away, if we had a look at the load variation and the load positioning, a goblet squat arguably is still going to struggle, is going to help him with his torso angle because he can stay more upright as opposed to having the load on his back with the back squat. There are other things you can have a look at as well when you've got biomechanical restraints is a better way of putting it. Biomechanical restraints with your lower body. Things such as heel elevation, whether you look to use a squat ramp or some weightlifting shoes, can be really beneficial for some people with kind of discrepancies with limb length to the lower body. But, you know, all of these things will come into consideration, whether it's free weight or machine work. So it's important to look at that and to think, okay, well, is that going to be a good exercise for me to perform? Is that going to allow me to hit the areas that I wanted to hit? So it's just things that are worth keeping in consideration. You know, you've got the black and white of the movement patterns that all work really, really well for everyone to a degree. But then you want to make sure that it's the variation that you're using for that and the variation of the exercise that you're selecting is going to nail the area that you want it to, okay? You don't want to end up battering yourself and end up coming away from a session feeling really beaten up because you're trying to force your body into a position that's not physically possible. Okay. And for me anyway, I'm not the, I think the whole no pain, no gain bowl, like just that whole category of bollocks is just a load of rubbish. I don't want anyone to ever train through physical pain. People are coming to me to train to get better, not to be put through pain. So you want to make sure that muscularly and biomechanically you're stimulating you're in a position where you're able to stimulate your muscles and put them into as much of a flexed and extended position as they can be in a safe manner. So these are things that are really important to take into consideration when you're looking at what exercises you are selecting. You know, when it comes to staying on the same subject of a squat, if you can find anyone that can squat more than they can leg press, let me know, because the main thing that will restrict the amount that someone can squat versus the amount they can leg press is the amount of the chain of the body and the area of things and the amount of things that can break down within that chain along the way having an impact. So a lot of the time when someone fails or misses a squat, it's rarely down to their leg drive. It'll often be down to something further up the chain, whether it be thoracic strength, that strength would be mid to upper back, or something along these lines that gives out before the actual leg drive does itself. If you think about any leg press, any decent leg press, you'll be in a position where the upper body is almost taken out of equation and you're just focusing on the leg drive. That's all you've got to worry about. So if you're purely focusing on getting your legs as strong as they physically can be, having having leg press in there is probably the best bet for you. If you want your squat to be stronger, then of course looking at your squat is the most valuable thing to do. But you also, like I say, want to identify all your weak links in the chain are with your squat movement and then strengthen those areas. Okay. And sure, adding in and looking at leg press alongside and with squats can be really beneficial as well, because it means that you're giving your legs further stimulus and strengthening them without having to worry about the implication and the load through the back as well. So hope that's maybe given you guys a bit of clarity on a few things. If you've got any questions regarding exercise selection, then just drop me a message or drop them down in the comments. But yeah, stay safe, stay good, stay strong. See you soon.